Welcome, guys, to the 1111 podcast broadcast. Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great morning, day, night, afternoon, midnight, wherever this is meeting you and greeting you. Everyone just take a deep breath and let it out. Very good. All right. So, new day, new dollar. Let's get it. Let's get it, y'all. Yeah, I'm feeling good, feeling great, everybody. Recommend if you are a person who indulges in cannabis, get you some CBD. And I'm not just talking about the oil. Go burn some CBD. Let all those brain follicles dance with it, groove with it. I just thought about a Goofy movie. But anyway, I hope everyone's having a great day, morning, night, wherever this is meeting. Greeting you. If you have any requests that you would like to hear covered on this podcast, please send them to @AgentK21 Podcast. That is on Instagram. Or you can reach me on Instagram or Twitter @AgentK21. Or if you have my number, send me a text, send me a direct message, hit me up, send me an email, however, and let me know what your topic requests are. All right, if you'd like to be featured as well on the channel, hit me up, let me know. And I'm actually going to talk about a topic request for my Black History Fact. All right, so this topic request, this comes in a while back from Carrie. She wanted to know the mouthpiece that slave women had to wear during the slave times. So did a little bit of research here. And our Black History Fact today is going to be on the slave iron bit. All right. And coming from Wikipedia, the iron bit, also referred to as a gag, was used by slave masters and overseers as a form of punishment on slaves in the southern United States. The bit, sometimes depicted as the scold's bridle, which is also known as the witch's bridle or Brink's bridle. It was used as a form of punishment. Used similar mechanics to that of the common horse bit. The scold's bridle, however, is almost always associated with its use on women in the early 17th century, particularly witches, let's be real. And there are very few accounts of the device as a method of torture against black slaves under that particular name. As opposed to the whip, the iron bit lacks the historic, social, and literal symbolic frame that would make information on the use of the iron bit as accessible. Its use throughout history has warranted some attention, though, mostly from literary texts. Even earlier, slave narratives and publications of newspapers and magazines from the 18th century on given evidence of this device being used to torture and punish slaves. So, just a little bit more information about this. This is a gag, a device that slaves had to wear. So, reading a little bit further here, several articles in newspapers mention that what appears to be the iron bit, but the name of the device varies from region to region where it is used. In the 1848 article of the North Star, states that dealing in slaves has become a large business. Establishments are made in several places in Maryland, at which they are sold like cattle. These places of deposit are strongly built and well supplied with iron, thumb screws, and gags, and ornaments with cowskins and whips, often bloody. A man wrote in an open letter to the editor of the Frederick Douglass paper about an abolitionist who was demonstrating the actions of slaveholders in the American South. I recollect the horror that thrived the hearts of the spectators when Mr. Gurney one evening placed on his head an iron machine of torture, which inflicted great pain upon the slave, and an iron gag penetrated his mouth, confining his tongue and preventing articulation. He exhibited the whips also, and many other implements of cruelty adopted by the planters and their agents. One newspaper advertisement from 1792 writes of a reward to be given for the capture of a runaway slave. The description of her is given that she is 5 feet 3 or 4 inches high, when she went away, wearing such clothing as Negroes generally wear in the summer, and carried with her a white linen coat and jacket. She is a vile creature, and for her many crimes I punished her with an iron collar, but suppose she soon got that off. Another article on the treatment of slaves by Daphne of Louisiana stated that 7 slaves were reportedly found in various parts of the residence, and they were said to be in need of medical attention. Some of them were allegedly chained in uncomfortable positions, and instruments of torture were said to have been found, specifically iron collars with spikes or sharp edges. So basically, if you look, and I might even post a picture of what this contraption looks like on my Instagram, but it's basically a gag that slaves had to wear. And just to reiterate this, a freed slave, Alua, I'm messing up his name, Olada Equino, was a freed man. He's from Nigeria, and he lived in London, and he was freed. His description of this comes from his own collection. So he wrote about it in his own slave narrative called The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olada Equino. Okay, so this is an inscription from there. When persons being held as slaves were accused by their masters of insubordination or of eating more than their allotment of food, they might expect to be fitted with an iron muzzle. In his autobiography, he describes his first encounter with such a device in the mid-1700s. In quotes, "I have seen a black woman slave as I came through the house, who was cooking the dinner, and the poor creature was cruelly loaded with various kinds of iron machines. She had one particularly on her head, which locked her mouth so fast that she could scarcely speak and could not eat or drink. I was much astounded and shocked at this contrivance, which I afterwards learned was called the iron muzzle." And there is a picture here of a description of what this man saw and what it looks like. What I find very interesting, I hadn't even read this or put 2 and 2 together before, is that the man whose quotes I just read is a African American who lived in London, and he has an interesting story too. I'll probably save his story for tomorrow's day of Black History. But I find it interesting that the Wikipedia tells of, a newspaper advertisement for the capture of a runaway slave, and they describe the runaway slave as a creature. And to see this man describing this woman as a poor creature, it's like becoming so numb to what you're being called that you say it yourself. You become so conditioned to, yesterday I challenged everyone to, hopefully not everyone, but for those who use the N-word, to not say it for the month of Black History Month, because we perpetuate the cycle of saying things and calling ourselves things that have been detrimental, that have been out of cruelty, have birthed out of trauma. And, what we speak over ourselves, whether we realize it or not, is manifesting within our bodies, within our minds. Everything we say, see, and behave, those are all the result of our conditioning. And so one way to change that, to break the cycle, is to change your words. That's one of the easiest ways. Start changing your words, start changing your thinking. It starts with the mind. And, just seeing that. But today I really want to talk about trauma. And I thought this was a great segue into it, because people who we all have experienced some form of trauma, no matter how good or great our lives, our parents, our history, or whatever it was. We've all experienced some form of trauma. If you're born and you're living, you've experienced trauma. To what degree determines, your life story, but we've all experienced trauma in one way, shape, or form. And as I was reading this, there was something I read that made me feel like, yo. I think it was in that article again, that newspaper advertisement, describing, they don't even know exactly how tall she is. Like, they're just like, yeah, she's like 5'3" or 5'4", somewhere around there. But just saying she's wearing such clothing as they generally wear in the summer. It made me think about it made me think about this movie I recently watched. Now, I try to cut it off, I really do, but I can't. I try to just turn it off. It's like a superpower. I see the subtleties so clearly in the subconscious messages and everything, and I feel like a lot of us do. And it's time to call that shit out. It's time to talk about it, because I'll be watching something on the news, or not the news, but I'll be watching a movie like with my friends or something, and it's like so subtly racist. And I'm like, can nobody see this? Like, am I just, okay, I guess that's just me. All right. And I'm just like, how can you guys not see the subconscious messages that are being broadcasted right now? And it's so fucking subtle that it really pisses me off. It's like these subliminal messages are so obvious in our commercials, in our food, in our everyday life, on the radio, everything. And it's like, I don't know. It's weird. And the higher we evolve, it's like you don't even have to see it. You feel that shit a mile away. You feel the frequency of what's coming at you, like 30 feet away. You're like, yep, I already know what this is. And so I'm watching this movie. It's called This Is the End. A lot of fucked up shit going on in here that I'm not even going to comment on. A lot of triggersome stuff, like, yeah, just so disrespectful in so many ways. But what I thought about as I'm watching it was, and what I think about oftentimes, is how misrepresented African American people are always portrayed. We only get certain roles. We only get a certain, things that we already know. We already know the stereotypes that they want to fill us in. And just watching this movie and seeing how they depict the black characters in particular. Movies like this, shows like The Office, I'm just like, come on, people, really? But anyway, so in the movie, and if you haven't seen This Is It and you want to see it, this is where you stop, because there's going to be spoilers. Spoiler alert, I'm about to tell this whole thing. And so I'm watching the movie, and it's like they're getting high, and they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, But it turns into a horror movie real quick, and they're like showing the end of days and all the narratives of how people have thought about the way things would end, from the religious standpoint to the zombie apocalypse to whatever else, right? And I'm watching how they're portraying this black woman in the movie, and she's at the convenience store, and she like cusses somebody out. Of course, that's what an angry black woman would do, cuss somebody out while she's at work, right? So she's cussing this guy out, and Seth Rogen and the other dude, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, other guy, they're like, oh, watching her, and then Seth Rogen goes, oh, I think she's mean. And I'm like, yep, right there. That's where the subtle seed is planted. Oh yeah, all black people are mean. All black women are angry and all this extra stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm watching that. And I see the way that she has to die off the show. And we already know, all of us already know in the scary movies who's the first to go. That's been like called out on so many levels. So we're like, okay, we're numb to it at this point. And then furthermore, later on in the movie, they're doing a whole bunch of subtle things. Subtle things. And then Craig, I forget his last name, he's a black comedian, and he draws, they're trying to figure out who has to go outside and, risk their lives or whatever, and he picks the straw that shows that he has to go. And James Franco character says, oh, that's racist. And it's like, really? It's like the whole what is that ball and chain, that back and forth of like, we're gonna do a bunch of racist subtle stuff first, and then the one thing that's actually not racist, we're gonna call that racist so that we can manipulate you into thinking that we're actually the ones who are cool. But I just pay attention to everything. I pay attention to like who they have the black character sitting next to, How many black faces are in the room? They make sure they have to have at least another black face in the room. It's just little things. So many little things. And then Rihanna's in the movie too, and just the way they do her, I'm just like, shh, y'all, this is so. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, and I could probably do like a whole segment on all the subliminal messages that I see every day, from men to women to black people to minorities to gays to everything. It's like, really? And I'm not just talking about stereotypes. I'm talking about the subliminal programming of how you should view such people. It's like, y'all ain't never met these people, have you? Y'all never met them. Clearly. But that's a whole nother rant for myself. Let me get out of my soapbox. But yeah, so reading this, I'm just like, wow, this is so deep. And now for all of us who have experienced trauma, we understand the pain of torture to a whole nother degree. And I feel like that becomes safe. The trauma becomes so safe because the healthier we get, it's not really pretty. I mean, I'm not just talking about acknowledging and observing and being aware of what you're doing or not doing. I'm saying, like, when you actually consciously choose healing, it's the craziest thing. The craziest thing. I was going to save this for another episode to talk about anxiety, and I might table it until then, but we've all have experienced trauma in some way, shape, or form. Most of us come from homes who have abandoned us, neglected us, or just simply did not meet our needs. And what happens when that happens is that our mind and our body creates a split, and we experience a trauma. Now, there are several ways to go about integrating this trauma. Self-love is the best way to get there, because most of us weren't taught to love ourselves. We were taught to love other people, or we were taught that love was foreign or dangerous or anything that love is actually not. And so once we unconditionally grant ourselves self-love, we're able to accept the things we don't like about ourselves. We're able to appreciate all facades of us. We're not suppressing, denying, rejecting it anymore. We're actually embracing it. We're not trying to fix it. We're not broken. Don't need to be fixed. We just have to have some awareness around it. But the thing about trauma is it's passed down through generations. And so, can you imagine somebody living, we don't know if our ancestors had this iron bit on them or not. Some of us probably have that in our DNA, and trauma is passed through our DNA, which is part of the reason, mainly the main reason why I've transitioned to a mostly vegan lifestyle, is because DNA stores trauma. And if I'm eating a mammal or anything related to that mammal that's experienced a torturous death, that pain is being ingrained into my body. Now, again, no shame on this page. So I love all my meat-eating friends. I do. And occasionally I will, I'm not an angel all the time. So, yeah. But I have more committed to a vegan lifestyle. It's a process, though. So I'm not fully vegan, but I'm making strides to be there. Because, I'm very conscious of what I indulge in. And not because there's anything wrong with anything else. It's just my own personal choice. And, so I think that when we experience trauma, naturally our shame is triggered. And when shame is triggered, we want to bury it. We want to suppress it. But shame dies when it is spoken in a safe, loving place. Now, if you don't have a safe, loving support system, friends, family around you, therapist, counselor, that is when you have to provide that for yourself. And for those who would like to have that provided, I do provide affordable counseling, and it is at no cost. Donations are accepted, and we work through traumas, we work through anxiety, we work through all the shame, all the guilt, all those fears, and all of that kind of stuff. As it's important to let it out. secrets. There's a saying, I don't necessarily like the way it's said, but there's a saying that you're only as thick as your secrets. And so we want to get that stuff out, whether we're journaling about it, whether we're writing about it, whether we're speaking it in a podcast, whether we're putting it in a voice memo, whether we're writing a song about it. However, we want to actually speak that so that we can put that to bed. We can actually make that sit in its grave. Now, it's very important to find safe, loving, supportive people who accept you unconditionally, people who embrace who you are and who are not going to shame you more so. Because that is more detrimental if you open up to someone and that person doesn't fully see, hear, or feel into you. There's going to be a disconnect, and that can cause more trauma. So be very selective and grant that to yourself as well. I think that's the best, is once you can grant that to yourself, you're not looking for it externally from anyone else. Once you can take yourself back to a painful memory and walk yourself to a happy ending, that is really where the magic lies. But it's also important to have people that can help you, support you on that path as well. And so, a lot of us have experienced trauma, and then we feel shame or guilt around our desires because of said trauma. So you might be into, for an example, you might be into BDSM or whipping or pornography or anything that is might be shame inducing. The first thing is to accept yourself and to realize this might be trauma bred, but I'm going to embrace all aspects of myself. So understanding where it comes from is also important. Understanding why do I have these weird desires? Why do I want to, do this thing or do that thing that I don't quite understand? Finding the understanding of it will either resolve that trauma or will free you from it. And what I mean by that is, once you dive deeper and say, hey, I actually like this and I'm not sure why, and then you realize, oh, that's because I've been traumatized into this, and actually I don't like this anymore. That's it being resolved. Or you find out, okay, this comes from my trauma, but I actually kind of like it, so I'm going to keep doing this. That frees you from the trauma, so there's no more shame and guilt associated with it. It's just this is me, it's a lifestyle, let's go. And you're able to accept and embrace yourself. But we want to make sure we're doing things from a love vibration and not a fear vibration. Anything that's birthed in trauma is fear. And so once we remove the fear, we can identify it. We can look at it objectively and say yes or no without fear or without repercussion, or without that compulsion to do it just because. It's no, I'm choosing to do this now, and I'm enjoying it without the shame and the backlash afterwards. And it's you give yourself your own liberation when you do that. And so trauma can be passed down, so it could be someone else's trauma. And for us, light workers, mystics, empaths, all of us, we can experience other people's trauma. One thing, when I was first becoming a psychologist, I wondered, how do you not vicariously get traumatized by other people's trauma? Because I'm an empath, and I can really become a sponge, so much so that it can be a little overwhelming. And that's where boundaries comes in. That's where implementing and maintaining boundaries comes in. And also clearing your energy field, clearing your space, meditating. Those kind of things can help separate the two. But if there is a trauma that has been passed down generationally that you no longer want to continue to thrive in, you got to get very serious about examining that thing and looking at it squarely from all sides, shapes, and purposes, and understanding where it comes from and how to get rid of it if that's something you want to get rid of. And getting rid of it requires a level of dedication and consistency to pour love on it and to really understand it. And, this whole process requires ourselves to become very intimate with ourselves. And that can be scary. That can be scary if you've never looked in the mirror. If you don't know what you look like, if you haven't looked at yourself deeply, intimately, it can be a very scary process. If you've been told that you're bad, wrong, or evil, and you feel like you're going to look at yourself and feel that or sense that, that can be a scary process. And, that was part of my experience. But once you actually own all of yourself, that's when the game changes. That's when the trauma chains and bonds just, they blow away. And also, like I said, protecting your energy, but also cleansing your energy. So whatever that looks like for you, whether that's sage, whether that's a hot bath, I don't know what it looks like for you, but bonds can be broken. I spoke about that on season 1. You are not bound to who you once were. You are not bound to any particular person. You are not bound to this happened to my mom or my daddy, so it's going to happen to me. No. You have free will. You have power. You have choice. Cleansing your sacral chakra, which is your willpower, will help remind you of the confidence of who you are, that you are not what other people have said about you. You're not even what you've said about you. You can revoke those words that you've even thought. And so once we start to integrate the trauma and not bypass it, a lot of us are really good at, all right, that's done. Let me speed past that because that's too painful. Or let me look at it at a very surface level. You got to dive deep, baby girl. You got to dive real deep on this stuff. All right. I'm saying that to myself. but once you get your snorkeler out and you just go sea deep diving, you're ready to reach the bottom of the ocean, however endless it is, that's when you're ready. You're ready to be on the path of enlightenment, of healing, of growth. When you can say no matter what comes your way, you're going to keep swimming, that's when it's time. And I do believe it is time now for me to go. But yes, we've all experienced trauma. We've all experienced some form of abuse, some form of neglect, some form of not having our needs met. So if you've experienced that, welcome to Earth, welcome to the human race. And you're fine exactly where you are and just as you are. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, baby steps. Just keep moving, keep looking up. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And you're on your own process, you're on your own pace. Everyone take your time, breathe it in, breathe it out. Until next time.